Wes is calling from Georgia. Wes is a theist who wants to talk about the bodily resurrection appearance to Paul. Hey, not our Paul, but a different Paul. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Yes, different Paul. I have talked to both of y'all before. Thank you for taking my call again today.
Hey, Wes.
I am fascinated with I'm fascinated with Paulogia's minimal witnesses, no resurrection required thesis that he's been hashing out over the years. It has helped me a lot to undo a lot of things that I was taught in Bible college. I have a degree and a graduate degree in theology, as a matter of fact, and a lot of it was just wrong. So
Nice.
Thank you, Paulogia, for that.
Thank you.
But I do have something, kind of a minor note to ask about with that, and that is Paulogia is saying that Paul never saw or claimed to see a bodily Christ or bodily resurrection, but only a vision. And that, to me, that sounds like we're bringing in Acts to get that narrative. Where are you getting from Paul himself that he only saw a vision? Because when he relates that he saw Christ, he does it in 1 Corinthians 15, where he's specifically talking about bodily resurrection.
Can you? So in the chapter he is, but the creed you're referring to in the list where Paul adds himself, he appends himself in 1 Corinthians 15, I think verse 8. He adds he's last of all to me as untimely born, right? So he starts that creed by saying, what I received I passed along to you as of first importance, which is in the time, that is his way of saying, this isn't what I say, this I'm repeating to you what other people had, and that's why people imagine that it was an early creed, right? And so he says, Christ died according to the scriptures, and he was buried, and then he was seen by Cephas, and then to the 12, and then to all the apostles, and then to James, the brother of Jesus, and last of all to me as untimely born. That's a paraphrase. I didn't have it right off the top of my head, but where in that creed does Paul say that he saw physically risen Jesus?
Ooh, we might end up disagreeing. This is going to be fun.
Sure, go ahead. Matt, do you want to go ahead? I don't want to cut you off. Go ahead.
No. I'm intrigued because I have a slight objection to what Paul just said, but I want to hear what you have to say, because if we have the same objection, then you and I can gang up on Paul, and that'll make a more fun show.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So First Corinthians 9:1, not to move the goalposts, but he does say I saw Christ, and then 15. So that seems like I'm kind of wording out from it. So maybe ignore that. So 1 Corinthians 15, he starts by saying all of these people saw Christ, and the people that he lists specifically, there are not any visions there. These are bodily appearances that the claims.
Whoa.
At least.
Please back that up. Please back that up. Please show me from 1 Corinthians 15, that creed, how Cephas or the 12 or the apostles or anyone saw him bodily.
Okay, I'll give you that. I don't think it's specifically in the creed, but it's in the chapter where the entire chapter is talking about a bodily resurrection. So it wouldn't follow what he's about to say. Rhetorically, it doesn't fit.
Well, Matt, you weigh in, and we'll the three of us will cage match it.
So I would say, in response to one little thing that Paul just said, which is, where does it say he saw him bodily? I would think that the default assumption would be that somebody's talking about an appearance bodily before non-bodily, because that's just the overwhelming majority of appearances. But when he says that he appeared to the 12, and I just did a video on the Doubting Thomas story, where you're putting fingers in the wounds, that to me reads as a physical appearance, not an astral or spiritual appearance. And so if the thing is he appeared to Paul and the 12, including Thomas, I would think that would be a claim of a physical appearance. I don't believe any of it happened, but
Right.
My understanding would be that that would be physical. What did I miss?
Well, so you're talking about a whole different set of people, right? So I feel like you actually have to have whole sets of different explanations for any of the people who converted before Paul and Paul. Like, so, whether this doubting Thomas story happened to me, like unrelated to why Paul came to believe.
But he said he
So you
appeared to
asked
the 12.
Paul is reporting that other people reported to him that he appeared to the 12. But even like Dale Allison, for example, in his giant resurrection book, which is probably the best resurrection book that exists, acknowledges that like the 1 Corinthians creed is not enough to be able to say that even Peter saw him bodily, right? Because it's just not there. And you want to talk about that in 1 Corinthians 15, it's the first fruits, right? That Paul wants to talk about this, that these resurrections are the first fruits of the end resurrection that we're going to have. That doesn't demonstrate. He wants to say, yes, we will all be resurrected then, but that doesn't affect now. And you asked if I'm getting it from Acts. I guess what I'm trying to get to is I'm not. 2 Corinthians 12 is actually where I lean on from Paul's own words. When he talks about, I know a man who was caught up in the third heaven. It's like whether it was in the body or not in the body, I did not know, but God knows. When Paul talks about outside of this creed, which Paul is saying isn't his words, when he talks about it himself, he talks about the vision, right? And in Galatians 1 and 2, he says, what I received from a vision. I did not receive it from any man. These men added nothing to my message. Right. So I'm not going into Acts is all I'm saying. To get this notion that go ahead.
I'm fine with the notion that Paul never attests to and may not, in fact, be talking about a physical interaction. I don't have any way to really determine. I think that there's cases to be made for both. I think you made a good one for it not being physical. But when he talks about first he appeared to Paul and the 12, to me, that harkens back to another story that we can't demonstrate, which is doubting Thomas, which I would think was physical. And I would assume that a physical appearance is generally, in most narratives, the assumption, kind of the rule that would need something to break. But I agree that I don't know that that we can draw any conclusion. Wes, where the hell are we? Have you got a conclusion you can draw?
I just feel like we are drawing, or Paulogia is drawing in sources that he would not say, or he would say, or for the Bible tells me so, in order to get the vision narrative. Galatians, he never says that he saw Christ in a vision. He says that he did not receive the gospel from man or from any man. He never says anything about a vision anywhere. The 2 Corinthians passage is highly disputed, doesn't necessarily refer to when he first saw Christ, but most people, or at least the way I was taught it, which I already confirmed was not exactly on great ground, but the way that I was taught it was that this is the when he was stoned and he himself came out of the body, not that he saw this is not referring to the first time that he met Christ. 1 Corinthians 15 is really the only place where he says when he saw Christ, and he relates it to directly that it should follow because he saw Christ that we are going to rise from the dead.
So Galatians 1, though, I did not receive it from any man. I received it from revelation by Jesus Christ, right? That's the phrasing.
The gospel
in Galatians.
That's not the appearance as revelation. His message.
But what did he receive if not Paul himself never is very underdeterminate, and I guess what source. So I'm sticking by my interpretation of Galatians. I'm willing to say, hey, these are interpretations.
I think this was an easy one. Galatians 1:1 specifically says, but by Jesus Christ and God the Father. Do you think he had an interaction physically with God the Father?
No, I don't. I don't think that's referring to his interaction with Christ.
Then in the exact same sentence where he goes, but by Jesus Christ and God the Father who raised him from the dead, he's putting those two together, and you think he had a physical interaction with one but not with the other. What's the justification for that?
Because in 1 Corinthians 15, he says he saw him.
But he doesn't say how. Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
He saw him in a body that was a spiritual body that we're all going to be glorified in. And then in Philippians 3, he says he'll change our vile bodies to one like his glorious body.
Philippians isn't one of the books.
Oh yeah, okay. Sorry. Yeah.
So here's the thing. So and I just wanted last point. If you think that he saw him bodily, that means Jesus returned, right? Like Jesus, at least 3 years or so, came back to earth. So the second coming, we're actually waiting for the third coming, in your view?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'd have to consider that. I haven't thought about that.
So for me, when I was a Christian, that was kind of part of the deal breaker too, right? It's like, no matter what, the body that he revealed to Paul, and that, like, the whole Damascus Road story, Paul doesn't describe anything like that. So we don't know if Paul saw someone on the ground. We don't know if he saw him in the sky. Like, assuming it all happened, there's no reason to think that Jesus actually came back in his wounded human body form. Like, there's just not sufficient support for that. But there's all that, and I've pulled only from what I think are the 7 undisputed letters of Paul for my arguments. What sources do you think I'm pulling in? Because that's, I think, what you're accusing me of. What sources do you think I'm pulling in to make my conclusion?
I haven't heard anything today, maybe in your other works where you're talking about the people on the road to Damascus with him, kind of like he's prone to visions, those kind of things.
Yeah, so unfortunately, someone recently reviewed my very first video that I did on this back in, I don't know, 2016 or so. And I cringed because when they played it back, I did say Damascus Road in my very first video on this. And that's a mistake. I absolutely shouldn't have. I was still fresh in this whole thing. I now, if you're going by my first video and it's been watched by a couple 100,000 people, so you're not wrong to do so, and I made it. I will just say here that I no longer would say the word Damascus Road or anything like that, because if that's what you're going on, I that is a mistake in a video, and I have not repeated it since in the newer ones.
Okay, well,
so you're fair. You're fair to critique me on that.
I think when you see 1 Corinthians 15, I think that his rhetorical argument does not follow if it's not what we would say is as close to a bodily resurrection as it gets.
But there are people who believe that Jesus rose from the dead, and who are scholars and have done this all their lives, who agree with me, right? Like you'll at least agree it's not slam dunk. At least that there's a scholarly.
Definitely not. No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Like, there's people who think that Jesus rose from the dead who agree with me on my interpretation of this. So it's not a slam dunk that it was, has to be physical.
I may be wrong, but I think I can solve this second coming, third coming thing, in that the Bible doesn't say there's a second coming, in that Jesus would only come down 2 times. Jesus could come down every weekend to individual people in a spiritual body, and it still wouldn't count as the second coming, which is a purposeful, revelation to the world. Nothing would stop Jesus from showing up right now, and it wouldn't be the second coming that they talk about. I get it.
But it was just impactful to me when I was a believer. Go ahead, Matt.
My question is whether Paul experienced Jesus in a physical body, in a spirit physical body, in a spirit apparition. I don't know whether it makes any difference. I want to know, did it happen in any sense? And I have no reason to believe that it actually happened in any regard.
Oh, you don't? So you think you think that Paul is lying in his own letters, or you don't think Paul wrote any letters?
I think that Paul may have had an experience that he's relating, but I do not believe that he had an experience with a risen Christ, an actual experience.
Okay, I understand. Here's what you're saying.
It's the same as the alien thing. You saw something. You had
right.
I don't know if he's lying, delusional, what, but I have no reason to believe that he actually interacted with a dead and risen Jesus.
Right, but you'll grant him, as we did in the previous calls, that he experienced something.
Well, no, what I'll grant is that the stories say that. I don't know. I don't know what's been altered. I don't know what Paul said. I don't know how accurate this is to Paul. I don't know how accurate it is to his experience. It's a cool story, but it's like saying, did Muhammad ascend? Did he ride a winged horse? Did the sun stand still in the sky? I know the stories say it did. I don't believe for a second the sun actually stood still in the sky. And I don't believe for a second that Paul actually, if I believe Paul had an interaction with a dead and risen Jesus, I would be I would not be sitting here saying, oh, there's no Jesus. I would believe it, but I might not follow. Anyway,
I guess
we know
but Paul self-reports that he had an experience. You would agree with that, right? Paul self-reports of experiences? I
would agree that the text shows Paul self-reporting an experience.
Okay. All right. So I gotcha. I tend to live in the world where I'm granting the 7 undisputed letters were written by Paul and that he was self-reporting.
I have the most of them. I mean, like Galatians, Thessalonians, Corinthians, Romans, Philippians, and Philemon.
Yep.
I'm good with those being written by Paul and generally being accurate, and that Paul was relaying something. But was he lying? I don't know. Was he misunderstanding or interpreting? I don't know. Do we have an accurate representation of Paul's thoughts? Kinda. I think that it's kinda, but I don't know. And so I'm like, this is the thing that's plagued me for 30 years almost, is people are like, oh, who do you say that I am? How do you explain this? And it is a story that's unverifiable. And so given the options of somebody lied, somebody misunderstood, somebody had delusions. I mean, you might as well ask me what I think about Revelation. I think it's lunacy written by a deranged individual. And so did many of the people who argued for it not to be included in the canon. But I have no idea whether or not it's true or what the explanation is. And so while it's interesting, I don't have any way. How do we show, Wes, that Paul actually had this experience and not either lied or was deluded, etc.?
But Wes, you might have to shake your phone or like do whatever if you're calling on the web there. Shoot,
Wes.
Oh, I wanted to know if my intellectual integrity was still intact. It sounded like it may have been now because I retracted my Damascus part of it. So,
all right. Well, we're going to move on.
Yep. Absolutely. Internal debates are fun, but we need to also talk to other people.
Eric, do you want to learn how to Mongolian throat sing? Check this out.
No, you try. No, keep that shit to yourself. Don't hear it.
Anyway, thanks for watching that clip. Patreon.com/calltheline is where you could support us. And maybe you should subscribe and like the video because it was a killer video. Or maybe it wasn't. Was it a Forrest video? If this was a Forrest video, you don't have to click like. If it was an Eric video, go ahead and click dislike.